Good morning and welcome to session 1 of your English summer school. So in today's lesson we're going to focus on these objectives. We're going to introduce our summer read called The Boy at the Back of the Class, and we're making predictions about what the book may be about based on the front cover and the blurb. So today we're looking that you're going to be able to make a plausible prediction about this book based on the information that's being presented to you. Okay, so hopefully you've all got your brand new copy of your book, and what I want you to do is just have a quick look at that front cover, and I want you to think about, based on that, what do you think the book is about and why. So for example, take a really close look at the picture and pay attention to what's going on there. Like, can you see at the bottom the frayedness of the bag? Okay, can you think about the fact that maybe the colour choices, think about why the backpack is important, why they've chosen that, what are the connotations maybe of the colour blue and the colour red. So just be having a little think about what do you think about that book and why. Okay, so at the back of the book we've got the blurb. So the blurb is what you might pick up when you're in the library or in a bookshop, and that might give you an idea of what the book's about and whether you'd be interested in reading it. So let's have a look at the back of the blurb. Okay, so there used to be an empty chair at the back of my class, but now a new boy called Ahmet is sitting in it. He's 9 years old, just like me, but he's very strange. He never talks, and he never smiles, and he doesn't even like lemon sherbets, which are my favourite. Okay, so just have a little look at the back of that and think about what you think might be happening and what we might be able to use to make some predictions about the book. So for example, Ahmet, his name might give you a little bit of a hint about what's going on. You might have a think about the fact that he's strange. Why would a 9-year-old boy, so that's just 1 year older than my son, why would a 9-year-old boy find him quite strange? What would make him different? Think about the fact that he never talks. Why might that be? Okay, so at the back of the class, have a think about why there might be an empty chair. So why was the chair empty? Okay. Again, think about why is he strange? What would you find strange about a new student if they arrived? Okay, so let's have a look at the second part of the blurb. But then I learned the truth, and I love that colon there because it tells us that an explanation is about to be offered. It's going to tell us what the truth is. Ahmet isn't strange at all. He's a refugee who's run away from a war, a real one, with bombs and bullies that hurt people. The more I find out about him, the more I want to help. That's where my best friends, Josie, Michael and Tom come in, because together we've come up with a plan. Okay, so let's have a look at these things here. So do you know what a refugee is? Okay, so what is a refugee? He's a refugee who's run away from a war, a real one, with bombs and bullies that hurt people. So a refugee, if we look at the definition there, the etymology of refugee is a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution or natural disaster. So a refugee is very different to an immigrant. An immigrant is someone who moves here for work, who chooses to move country. A refugee is a person who's been forced to, so they've got very little choice. So we now know that Ahmet is a refugee. So, and the author's quite cunning here because they said that's where my best friends Josie, Michael and Tom come in, because together we've come up with a plan, and that makes us as a reader wonder, what's the plan? What's going to happen? So just have a little think about what you think the plan is going to be. So they want to help him. What might they come up with? Okay, so before we have a look at chapter 1, the empty chair, let's have a look at some vocab first, some words that we might need to know to understand what's going on. So first word that you might need to know is Tintin, a comic character. Okay, so this is, just in case you're unsure, this is Tintin. You might have seen him, so we need to know that. The word curious, okay, so you can see that question mark in here. What does curious actually mean? So curious is an adjective If you are curious, you are eager to know or learn about something. If something is described as curious, it is strange and unusual. And here we've got some synonyms, so other words that mean curious: inquisitive, intrigued, strange or peculiar. And we've got an example there from the book. So then in the third week, something happened that was so surprising and made everyone so curious that even Mrs. Khan couldn't make us focus on our lesson properly. We're gangly. This was a word that I was described as when I was at school. I was very gangly. So gangly means if someone is gangly, they are usually tall and skinny and often move awkwardly. They might trip over a lot. That's definitely me. Once you come to the studio, you'll soon discover that about me. Synonyms for gangly are beanpole, lanky, tall, skinny. Skinny not so much, but definitely lanky and beanpole were two words that I was described at school. And Josie's tall and gangly and is always chewing on her hair. Ingenious, this is a really good word, one of my favourites. It's an adjective. When someone is ingenious, they are clever, original and inventive. Synonyms for ingenious are insightful, creative, imaginative. Michael's mostly quiet, but when he does say something, grown-ups usually look impressed and say that it's ingenious or insightful. They use other strange words beginning with in. And last but not least, memorise. It's a noun and it means when you memorise something, you learn it off by heart. Synonyms for memorise are learn, remember, recall and retain. Mrs. Saunders makes you memorise long words from the dictionary and doesn't let you leave until you've learnt them all off by heart, the meaning and the spelling. So what I would like you to do now is to go to your booklet and you will see those 4 words on a grid, and I would like you to have a go at using those words yourself in a sentence. So pause the video now and get that done. Okay, so you should have done your vocab. Now let's read chapter 1 together, The Empty Chair. There used to be an empty chair at the back of my classroom. It wasn't a special chair. It was just empty because there's no one sitting in it. But then, one day, just 3 weeks after school started, the most exciting thing that could happen to anyone happened to me and my 3 best friends. And it all began with that chair. Usually, the best thing about starting a brand new term is that you get extra pocket money to buy new stationery with. Every year, on the last Sunday of the summer holidays, my mum takes me on an extra special adventure to hunt down my stationery set for my new school year. That's my favourite part of the year as well. Sometimes I get so excited that my feet feel jumpy inside and I don't know which shop I want to go into first. There aren't many nice stationery shops where I live. They only ever have boring dinosaur sets for boys or princess sets for girls. So mum takes me on the bus and train into the city, where there are a whole street of shops, even huge department stores that look like tall blocks of flats from the outside. Last year, I found a space-themed set with pictures of an astronaut floating past the moon. It was on sale too, so I bought a pencil case, a math set, rubbers and a long ruler, and still had nearly £1 left over. The ruler is one of my favourite stationery pieces because the astronaut floats across it in water mixed with silver stars. I played with it so much that the astronaut got stuck to one side and couldn't be bothered to move again, but it wasn't my fault. Mr. Thompson, our teacher last year, had such a boring voice that my hands needed something to do. That's why it's important to have fun stationery with you in class, because you never know when you'll need to stop your brain from falling asleep or doing something that might get you into detention. This year, I bought a Tintin and Snowy set. I love Tintin, even though he's only a character in a comic book and isn't real. I want to be just like him when I grow up. I think being a reporter and getting to solve mysteries and go on adventures must be the best job in the world. My mum and dad usually buy me a brand new Tintin comic book for my birthdays, and mum saves all the comics her library's about to throw away because they're too old and ripped and gives them to me, so I have a whole collection of them now. I've read them all at least 50 times, but I'll have to think about another pet to travel with because I'm allergic to dogs. I don't think cats or hamsters or even trained mice could be half as useful as Tintin's dog Snowy, and even though I've thought about it for at least a year now, I still haven't come up with anything. Because the Tintin stationery set was a lot more expensive than the astronaut one and wasn't on sale, I could only buy a pencil case, a small ruler and 2 rubbers. I had to think about it for a very long time, but in the end I decided spending all my pocket money in one go was worth it. Not just because everything had Tintin on it, but because if you press a button on the pencil case, Snowy barks and Captain Haddock's voice cries out, "Blistering barnacles!" I've already been told off for pressing it in the middle of maths class last year, but if you can't press a barking dog button in maths, then I don't see the point of it. I don't like maths. Me neither. Simple maths is fine, but this year we're learning about long division and square numbers and all sorts of things that my brain doesn't like doing. Sometimes I ask for help. But it's embarrassing putting your hand up too many times to ask the same question. I'm lucky because Tom and Josie and Michael always help me with the things I get stuck with. They're my best friends and we do everything together. Tom's got short spiky hair and a side smile and a big Adam's apple that looks like a ping pong ball got stuck in his throat. He's the smallest in our group but he's also the funniest. He only joined our class last year after his parents moved here from America, but we became friends instantly. He has 3 older brothers who all tease and bully him. Not seriously, only for a joke, but I think they steal his food too, which is why he's so skinny and always super hungry. I once saw him eat a whole pizza with extra toppings and a double cheeseburger for lunch and still not be full up, so I hide my snacks and chocolate bars from him when I can. Josie has large brown eyes and at least 1 million freckles across her face. She's tall and gangly, there's that word, and is always chewing on her hair. She's the fastest girl in our year and can kick a football past any goalie from the other side of the pitch. She's the coolest person I know, and I've known her since we were 3. Our mums say we became instant friends the first day we started nursery, so they decided to become friends too. I don't really remember much about myself at that age, but Josie's in all my school memories. We even got our first detention together last year, all because of a hamster called Herbert. Josie had heard one of the upper school bullies say that he was going to flush our class hamster, Herbert, down the toilet at home time. Josie told me, and we decided to go on a hamster rescue mission. We hid Herbert in my rucksack before home time and took him straight to my house. But of course, Mum found out and made me take him back the very next day. I tried to explain to boring Mr. Thompson what had happened, but he wouldn't listen and gave me a detention. And even though she didn't have to, Josie stood up and said she'd help me steal Herbert too, just so we could do detention together. You know, a friend's a best friend when they're willing to sit in detention with you. Michael has the neatest, puffiest afro out of all the boys in our year. Most people think he's weird, but not us. His glasses are always broken and his shoelaces are never done right, so he's always tripping up or bumping into things when he walks, but we're all so used to it now that we never notice. He's mostly quiet, but when he does say something, grown-ups usually look impressed and say, "It's ingenious," there's that word, or insightful, or use other strange words beginning with in it. I don't know what they mean, but I guess they mean he's clever. Grown-ups always like coming up with long words for simple things. Michael gets made fun of a lot because he can't run fast or kick a ball in a straight line, but he doesn't care. I wouldn't care either if I was as rich as him. His dad is a professor and his mum is a lawyer, and because they're always busy, they buy him all the latest gadgets and books and the coolest new games. When we went to his house last year for his birthday party, we saw his room for the first time. It looked like the inside of a toy store. I think it must be easier not to care about what people think when you've got that many toys in your life. Josie and Michael are always competing with each other to see who can get the most gold stars and A's in class. Michael is the best at history and Josie is the best at maths, but I'm better at reading and spelling than both of them, especially Josie. She hates reading and never ever reads anything outside of class. She says she doesn't have an imagination, so there's no point to reading books. I find that strange, because how can anyone not have an imagination? I think she must have had one when she was younger, but it was knocked out of her when she fell off her bike last summer. Mum says people without imaginations are dead inside. I don't think Josie's dead anywhere. She talks too much. Having 3 best friends can make school seem like the best place to be, even on the most boring day. Although this year, school has become a whole lot more fun, and that's because of our new teacher, Mrs. Khan. Mrs. Khan has an extra bouncy hair and always smells of strawberry jam, which is much better than smelling of old socks like Mr. Thompson used to do. She's new to the school and extra clever, much cleverer than Mr. Thompson ever was, and she gives us prizes on Fridays when we've all been good. No other teacher in our year does that. Mrs. Khan lets us do all sorts of interesting things that we've never done before. In the first week of school, she's helped us make musical instruments out of the things we found in the school's recycling bin. And in the second week, she brought in a brand new comic book to read to us that wasn't even in the school library yet. Then in the third week, something happened that was so surprising and made everyone so curious, there's that word, that even Mrs. Khan couldn't make us focus for our lessons properly. And it all began with the empty chair. It was on the 3rd Tuesday after school had started and Mrs. Khan was taking the register. She was just about to call my name when there was a loud knock at the door. Usually when there's a knock on the door, it's just someone from another class bringing a note, so no one really pays any attention, but this time it was Mrs. Sanders, the head. Mrs. Sanders always wears her hair in the exact same way and peers over her glasses when she talks to anyone. Everyone is scared of her because when she gives detention, she doesn't just make you sit in a room, she makes you memorise long words from the dictionary and doesn't let you leave until you've learnt them all off by heart, the meaning and the spelling. I've even heard of lower graders being stuck in detention for hours because they had to learn words that were as long as this page. So, when we saw that it was Mrs. Sanders at the door, we all fell silent. She looked very serious as she walked up to Mrs. Khan, and we all wondered who was in trouble. After she had whispered and nodded for a few seconds, she suddenly turned around and, peering over her glasses at us, pointed to the empty chair at the back of the class. All of us turned around to have a look at the empty chair. This was the chair. As I said, it was a pretty ordinary chair and it was empty because a girl called Dina left our class at the end of last year to move to Wales. No one really missed her except for her best friend Clarissa. Dina had been a bit of a show-off and was always talking about how many presents her parents got her every week and how many pairs of trainers she had and all sorts of other things that no one else cared about. She liked to sit at the back of the class because then she and Clarissa could pretend to be doing lessons when really they were drawing pictures of their favourite pop stars and giggling about someone they didn't like. Someone else could have taken the seat, but no one really wanted to sit next to Clarissa. That's why the chair had stayed empty. After whispering for a few more seconds with Mrs. Khan, Mrs. Sanders left the classroom. We expected Mrs. Khan to say something, but she seemed to be waiting, so we waited too. It was all very serious and exciting. But before we could start guessing about what was going on, Mrs. Sanders came back, and this time she wasn't alone. Standing behind her was a boy none of us have ever seen before. He had short dark hair and large eyes that hardly blinked and smooth pale skin. Everyone, said Mrs. Khan, as the boy went and stood next to her, this is Ahmet, and he'll be joining our class from today. He's just moved to London and he's new to the school, so I hope you'll all do your very best to make him feel welcome. We all watched in silence as Mrs. Sanders led him to the empty chair. I felt sorry for him because I knew he wouldn't like sitting next to Clarissa very much. She still missed Dina, and everyone knew she hated boys. She said they're stupid and smell. I think it must be one of the worst things in the world to be in a new place and have to sit with people you don't know, especially people that stare and scowl at you like Clarissa was doing. I made a secret promise to myself right there and then that I would be best friends with the new boy. I happened to have some lemon sherbets in my bag that morning, and I thought I would try and give him one at break. And I would ask Josie and Tom and Michael if they would be friends too. After all, having 4 new friends would be much better than having none, especially for a boy who looked as scared and as sad as the one now sitting at the back of our class. That's chapter 1. Okay, so what I want you to do, you've got a little discussion box in your booklet, and I would want you to have a little think about these questions. So, what is a narrator? So, who is narrating the story? So, the narrator is the person narrating. So, who's telling you the story? What do you know about him? Did you predict that this is what would happen? So, were your predictions right based on looking at the front cover of the book and the blur? Who would you rather have as your teacher, Mr. Thompson or Mrs. Khan? Why? Remember to write down your reasons. And what do you think might happen next? So pause the video now and complete your discussion box. Okay, so let's have a look at a little section of the text. And think about why Ahmet might look scared and sad and what might be going through his mind. So we've got a little extract here. I think it must have been one of the worst things in the world to be new to a place and have to sit with people you don't know, especially people that stare and scowl at you like Clarissa was doing. I made a secret promise to myself right there and then that I would be friends with the new boy. Just have a think. Why might Ahmet be so scared and sad? And what do you think is going through his mind? So think about what you know about him already, that he's from another country, he's a refugee. Think about why school might be a scary place. Have a little think about that. So let's have a little think about how Ahmet might be feeling. These might be some of the emotions that you're having about starting a new school in September. So maybe we can empathise with Ahmet. Does he feel singled out? You know, he's arriving separately to everybody else, nervous, intimidated, lonely, anxious, alone, So how do you think Ahmet is feeling? Just be having a little think about that. Okay, so you should have an idea of how you think Ahmet's feeling, and that's going to lead to today's independent writing activity. So what I want you to do is write a recount as if you were Ahmet. So you're going to be the narrator here. You're going to start the story at the time when you entered the classroom and describe what happened until the point you sat down. So you might want to look back at the chapter and think about where the chair is, who's sitting next to the empty chair, you know, what that might look like, what your initial thoughts of the teachers are. So I would like you to write that. So in your booklet, you will see that task and you will see a gap for you to complete that task. So try and use the feeling words of the previous slide to help you, so the ones that we've just talked about. And then remember that this is in first person, so you're writing as if you are Ahmet. So think about how you felt, what you saw, what you were thinking, what you could see and hear. So I've got a little example here if you're struggling. I walked slowly into the classroom, keeping my gaze firmly on the floor so that I didn't have to look into the eyes of the other children. I stood quietly behind the strange teacher. She seemed nice and smelled like strawberry jam, but I was trembling with fear. I had never felt so anxious in all my life. So think about, you could start off there, so you could use my example to start with, and then you could carry on from there. An extra challenge for you, can you use some of the words from the vocab grid as well, like serious, memorise, like I would never memorise all these names. Can you use some of those words? Okay, so pause the video now and complete that task. Okay, so today's exit ticket is, can you answer these questions? There's a space in your booklet to do this. So who is Tintin? You might need to do a bit of extra research on that. Which characters have we been introduced so far? Who is narrating the story? And who is your favourite character so far and why? So that's your final task for today. At the bottom of your booklet, you will see that I would like you to read chapter 2 before starting next lesson. I've also recorded myself reading chapter 2 on the next slide if you feel that you need that little bit of support. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all in September.
2. The Boy with the Lion Eyes. For the rest of the day, I kept sneaking glances over my shoulder at the new boy and noticed that everyone else was doing the same. Most of the time, he kept his head down low, but every so often I'd catch him staring right back at us. He had the strangest coloured eyes I'd ever seen. Like a bright ocean, but on a half sunny, half cloudy day. They were grey and silvery blue, with specks of golden brown. They reminded me of a programme I saw about lions once. The camera operator had zoomed into a lion's face so much that its eyes had taken up the whole screen. The new boy's eyes were like those lions' eyes. They made you want to never stop staring. When Tom joined our class last year, I had stared at him a lot too. I didn't mean to, but I kept imagining that he came from an American spy family, like the ones you see in movies. He told me later that he thought there was something wrong with me. The new boy probably thought there was something wrong with me too, but it's hard to stop staring at new people, especially when they have eyes like a lion. We had geography in first period that morning, so we couldn't get up to say hello to the new boy. Then at break time I looked around the playground for him, but couldn't see him anywhere. In second period we had PE, but the new boy didn't join in. He sat in the corner staring at his rucksack, which was red with a black stripe in it and looked very dirty. I thought he must have forgotten his PE kit because his bag looked empty and saggy. I tried waving at him, but he never looked up, not even once. Whenever we do PE, I like to pretend that I'm training to join Tintin on an adventure and have to be the super fastest human being on the planet. The only problem is my legs aren't as long as I want them to be. So even when I jump as hard as I can, I always get stuck in the middle of the vault. Every birthday, I make a wish that I'll grow at least 4 inches taller, and I drink as much milk as I can so that my bones will stretch. But even though I'm 9 3/4 now, I've only grown 1.5 inches since my last birthday, or at least that's what my mum says. I tried my best to jump over the vault in one go in front of the new boy, but I got stuck again. Luckily, he didn't see me because he was just staring at his rucksack the whole time. After PE, we had lunch break, and Josie, Tom and Michael and me decided we would try and find the new boy, said he wasn't all on his own. We waited right next to the playground doors, but the new boy never came out. Tom even went to check the boys' toilets because that's where he tried to hide on his first day when he didn't know anyone, but there was no one there. Maybe he's having lunch with the lower grades by mistake, said Josie, but when we got into the lunch hall, we couldn't see him anywhere. In the afternoon, we had history, and we were split into groups, but the new boy was allowed to sit on his own and not join in. Mrs. Carn spent more time with him than she did with any of our groups, and she was pointing at things in the new workbook she had gotten him. Maybe he's deaf, someone whispered. Maybe he can't speak English, muttered someone else. There's definitely something wrong with him, whispered everyone. That afternoon, I don't think any of us learnt about what it was like to be a gladiator living in Roman times, because we were all too busy whispering about the new boy. He must have known what we were doing, because his face was red the whole time. Then, at last break, he disappeared again. He must be inside, said Michael, after we'd finished searching the whole playground for the third time in a row. By now, my lemon sherbets were getting sticky in my pocket and beginning to look like bright yellow fuzzballs. At home time, everyone was still talking about the new boy and wondering who he was. I think it was because the whole day had passed and no one knew anything about him except for his name, not even Clarissa, and she had been sitting right next to him. People kept running up to her to ask if the new boy had said anything to her, but she just shook her head and said he was using a lower year workbook, so his reading and writing mustn't be very good. On our way to the bus stop, we saw everyone crowding around Jenny just outside the front gates. Jenny is famous in school for always knowing something about everything, so we ran over to her to hear what she was saying. Jenny is in the class next door and has the longest hair in school. She likes to spy on people and then tell stories about them to other people. Sometimes the stories are true, but most of the time they're only half true because she makes things up. Last year, she told a story about Josie cheating in a football match by pretending to fall down so she'd get a penalty kick. But I was there, and so was Tom, and we both saw her fall down after being kicked in the leg by an upper boy called Robert. She had a big fat bruise on her leg the shape of Australia for weeks afterwards, but no matter how many times we showed everyone the bruise and told them what really happened, no one believed us, not even the people that were there. Sometimes I think everyone likes to believe a lie, even when they know it's a lie, because it's more exciting than the truth. Now that's a really important line, and it's going to come back a few times in the novel, I think. Sometimes I think everyone likes to believe a lie, even when they know it's a lie, because it's more exciting than the truth. And they especially like to believe if it's printed in a newspaper. I know that now. I also know why Mum says politicians are liars and always shouts at them whenever they come on the telly. Maybe Jenny will be a politician when she grows up. When we got closer, we heard Jenny telling everyone that the new boy had spent all his break times with Mrs. Sanders because he had done something bad in his old school and was too dangerous to be let out into the playground with us. But I didn't believe her. I could tell Michael didn't believe her either, because he asked her how she knew so much about it. Jenny got angry and crossed her heart and hoped to die that she had heard Mr. Owen talking to Mrs. Timms outside the teacher's staff room, and that both of them had said how sorry they felt for Mrs. Carn and how glad they were that the new boy wasn't in their class because it wasn't going to be easy to deal with. But before we could ask her any more questions, Jenny's dad began to beep at her from his car, so she ran off. We all watched her go and then looked back through the school gate to see if the new boy had come out, but we couldn't see him anywhere. He's probably left already, said Josie. Tom and Michael nodded. Let's just wait 2 more minutes, I said, hoping that he would still be inside. And I was glad I did, because a few seconds later, the new boy came out into the playground. He was holding Mrs. Carn's hand and staring at the ground. A woman who was waiting by the outdoor benches suddenly shouted, "Cooey!" and ran over to them. She was wearing a long brown coat, a woolly hat and a bright red scarf. She stood and talked to Mrs. Carn for a long time and nodded an awful lot, but we couldn't hear anything because we were standing too far away. I wonder if that's his mum, said Josie. I didn't think so, because the new boy didn't hug her at all and seemed shy around her too. Come on, said Michael. He was pointing to his watch, which was beeping like a submarine. Michael has a special watch that tells him when the next bus is coming. It's meant to help him to get to place sometime, but I've only ever seen it make him bump into things more quickly. No way, I said, and before I could think about it too much, I ran over to where the new boy was standing. Hello, I said, tapping him on the shoulder. Mrs. Carn and the woman in the red scarf looked down at me as I reached into my pocket and got out a lemon sherbet. Here, I said, holding it out. I was a little bit embarrassed because by now the sherbet was covered in fluff, but it was still good enough to eat. That's a good thing about lemon sherbets. No matter how bad they look, they always taste delicious. I think I must have spoken too loudly because the new boy took a step away from me as though he was frightened. It's all right, Ahmet. You can take it, said the woman, motioning to him with her hands as she was speaking in sign language. But the new boy grabbed her hand and hid his face behind her arm. I didn't know what to do because I've never really scared anyone so much before that they wanted to hide away from me. The woman spoke to him gently again, and after a few seconds he took the sherbet and looked straight at me with his lion eyes before hiding away again. "Thank you," said the woman. She looked at me and gave me a smile. I liked her deep brown eyes because they seemed kind, and her bright pink cheeks. But what I liked best of all was how her long blonde hair swirled around in the wind from underneath her hat. Amat will enjoy that on the ride home. I nodded, and then back to where Josie and Tom and Michael were waiting for me. I felt extra happy because Mrs. Khan had smiled at me with her whole face and given me a wink too, just like my dad used to do whenever he thought I'd done something good or when he was teasing my mum. When I'm a grown-up, I'm going to wink at people like he used to do, and make them feel special too. And as we made our way home, I decided that the next day, whenever I saw the new boy staring at him, I was going to give him just as many winks as I could. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed the story so far, and I'll see you for tomorrow's session.